Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Mike Madrid from Project Lincoln. Welcome to the show.
Great to be with you. I'm excited about this one, Tom.
You know, I have been seeing these Lincoln Project ads all the time. I've been retweeting and sharing them as well.
Well, good. Important.
I find that they're a little more hard-hitting than the Biden ads, which are good. But I think the Lincoln Project ads seem to capture like what the hell is going on? Like, how is this possible frustration a lot of us have?
Right.
So first of all, kudos on that. I think you're hitting a nerve and you're speaking to how people really feel. Your background is that you've been a Republican for a long time, supporting Republican candidates. And, obviously we have a Republican at least in name in the White House right now. Was that a hard call to go down that path? And because, I remember growing up, like people used to say like Reagan's rule was like, you don't speak ill of other Republicans.
Yeah, the 11th commandment.
Yeah,
Tom, look, it's a great question. Let me answer it this way. It's been extremely difficult and extremely hard coming to the realization that Trumpism is really what Republicanism is now. It's no longer the home of conservatism, at least not for the moment. Mm-hmm. And they really are, diametrically opposed ideologies and beliefs. So there is a certain grief and there's a loss and there's a certain pain and a certain realization that you've spent 30 years working to build something for a movement and a cause, which is now kind of rotted out. That has been very difficult. Opposing Donald Trump has been very easy. I mean, there was no struggle at all there. I mean, from the moment he came down the escalator and started attacking, Mexicans, which my expertise is in Latino demographics. It was easy. There was no hesitation. It was just like this is ridiculous. And you also, I think, come to this. There's this confusion within you when you start to realize everybody's with me, right? Like all of these Republicans I've been working with 30 years, like this is obvious racism. This is obviously disgusting and gross, right? Let's go get them. And people are kind of going, well, let's hear them out. Let's listen to this, nonsense. And they're going, what is happening? And I think that's been part of the disappointment, I think, in the kind of cowardice that has become a defining characteristic of the modern Republican Party is really challenging.
Is it basically as simple as he has so much power that anyone who speaks ill of him, they realize like their own political future is at jeopardy, and they'll just kind of wait the storm over and hope to go back to normal in 2021? Is that their plan? Or?
That's a very big part of it. And I mean, I'm not just talking about the Senate Republicans or House Republicans. I'm talking about the average Republican who's involved in this, either as a lobbyist, as a consultant, as an activist. Mm-hmm. You have to remember, Donald Trump didn't win a majority of the voters in the Republican primary. He won a plurality.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not like he had early initial widespread support. We believe very firmly there's still a significant segment of the Republican base that is just with him because they're against socialism or they're against Mexico or the Chinese or whoever whoever's attacking that day. But that doesn't excuse the behavior. In fact, it makes it worse. It's really, like you just said, a lot of this is really a bunch of people, just cowards, just trying to wait it out, pretending like it's not happening and thinking that they're somehow going to be able to excuse it or forget about it or pretend it never happened. And there's going to be a lot of that, by the way, Tom, when he's gone. I'm not saying that the Republican Party isn't the party of Trump. I think it largely is. But there are going to be a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, who were complicit in this, who supported this, who were either overtly or tacitly along for the ride, that are going to, pretend like they had no idea. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I would never support that. And that's what allows this stuff to get stronger. That's what's so sad and so scary.
Do you think those folks who either aided and abetted him, or at least sort of, averted their eyes, will there be any kind of comeuppance for those folks? Or do you think they'll kind of go back to normal and wrap themselves in the flag and act like nothing happened?
They're going to try desperately to go back to normal and again pretend that there's not. But we're in an era and a time where there's a lot of receipts. There's a lot of people. I mean, last 3.5 years, people know where you stand. And most of this stuff is written down somewhere, whether it's on Twitter or your Facebook post or something. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot of deleting after all this. There's a lot of scrubbing of your profiles. But as I keep telling people, keep the receipts. These are the type of people that allow a democracy to slide into authoritarianism. It's not the bullies like Donald Trump. We can take them. It's the cowards that enable it. That's the problem. There will always be people like Donald Trump. The world will just always be that way. I just believe that we have more character as an American people, and I thought we had more reverence for the Constitution and American institutions as a Republican Party. We have not demonstrated that to this point, and it's getting pretty damn late in the ballgame. So, yeah, I think they're going to try and go back and pretend like this never happened. I didn't vote for him. I don't know who voted for him. There will be a lot of shame associated with it, as there should be. But again, I think that there's enough of us watching the right people to say, no, you were part of this. You were complicit. You were abetting this. You averted your eyes, as you said. Yeah. You looked the other way when your country needed you. And, we'll remember that. It's not just we, the Lincoln Project. It's we, the country, that needs to really hold this to account.
So before we go further down this path, which is super interesting, especially I'm curious about what's going to happen to the Trump staffers and administration. Some of those folks have been in politics for a long time. I realized that we didn't get an introduction to you, Mike, and we just dove right into it. I was so interested in this topic, but give us a little bit of background on who Mike Madrid is.
So I'm a Californian. I've been involved in Republican politics for the better part of 30 years. I grew up in Southern California at a time when the state was undergoing profound demographic change. We started to have this really extraordinary growth in the Latino population, of which I'm Hispanic. I'm of Mexican-American descent. We had a huge API community burgeoning, and I was really interested in studying at that time and learning about how democracy would work and what the transition to these different, constituencies would be, especially those that didn't necessarily have a deep cultural rooting in these Western notions of democracy. How do you make the American experiment work with a people from a cultural background that wasn't necessarily steeped in some of these notions? I thought that was fascinating. And so I went back east. I went to Georgetown University and studied race and politicization. And I was there in the mid-1990s when there was a lot of these changes going on in California. And I realized very quickly, even though I love, political campaigns and Republican politics, and Republicans had just taken over the House of Representatives in 1994 for the first time in 40 years, that rather than being, a staffer on the Hill, I wanted to kind of come and live California and watch this unfold and be involved in campaigns and experience it and learn more as America was at this inflection point. And so I came back and started working in Sacramento and working again as kind of this strange creature. I was a Latino expert, but I was a Republican, which didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. And I guess it makes even less sense now. But that was where I spent most of my time. I became the political director of the California Republican Party and the press secretary to the Republican leader in California. And I did races all over the country, kind of lived out of a suitcase during the late 90s and early 2000s, doing races in New York and Florida and Texas and all places in between, and kind of finally settled down into my niche and started just building a firm and doing campaigns for a living. And, I kind of balanced a little bit. I taught a course at University of Southern California last year called Race, Class, and Partisanship, which is kind of the inflection point of all these things happening in America at this moment in time. And so I'm very data driven. We're going to talk a little bit about that. My expertise and forte is in targeting voters and speaking to Republican voters specifically, but Latino voters as well. And I like to, of course, try to draw the intersection of all of that, which makes for a really interesting kind of petri dish of ideas and activities.
Did you ever have an opportunity to get involved in a presidential campaign?
Yeah, the last presidential campaign I did was George W's campaign in 2000. And what we did then, I was part of a team that did, I'll make a little news with you here. There's a really fascinating team of folks that came together to do the Latino aspects of that campaign. And at the time, you remember, for those of you who are old enough to remember, probably not many of you, it was the most innovative and aggressive and forward-thinking Latino campaign ever done to that point in time. George W. set records with the number of Latino votes that he got. And the nice part was we were proving that the Republican Party could change. The Republican Party could be more diverse. It didn't have to regress into this white identity party and run against and be afraid of the world. And that was really the hope. And I was planning on moving back, my young family, back to Washington, D.C., but 9/11 happened a couple of years after that. And 9/11 changed everything. It changed the Republican Party, changed the country, and we became a much more inward-focused country. And the Republican Party reflected that. There was a lot of fear of non-white people that really came along with that experience, and it forever changed the party, and those dreams were dashed. And so I stayed in California and kind of continued my work here.
It is amazing. I often think about the comparison of Trump and George W. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously for some people watching this. I happen to feel like George W.'s presidency had a lot of huge blunders, but I will say I felt like the way he talked about immigration and I think there are Bush family members who are of Latino kind of heritage, spoke to kind of this melting pot ideal that we always talk about, but he kind of represented and he embraced it. I even think I remember seeing him speaking in Spanish from time to time, being from Texas. So that was super cool. And then after 9/11, I was very impressed at how he, kind of actively talked about, hey, Muslim Americans do not do this. Like this is a very specific, extreme group of people, in the Taliban, that kind of thing, and in Al-Qaeda. And you compare that to Trump today, and as an Asian American, hearing stuff like, oh, China did this to us, and the China virus and the Kung flu, it's like a complete, he's just fanning the flames. Yeah. Whereas at least George W., I think, tried to say, hey, we got to come together.
Look, that's an excellent observation. I think that's exactly the way history is going to view it. Is 9/11 completely changed the Bush administration, and in the fog of war, decisions are made, oftentimes not good ones. And I don't know if the president, regrets some of those decisions. I don't know that he would necessarily say them publicly if he did.
Right.
I agree with you. I think there was a lot of strategic errors made in the management of the crisis was not done well. I will say that the Bush presidency pre 9/11 was an entirely different focus and administration. And I think that President Bush, in his character, in his nature, and in his makeup, is naturally one that is very inclusive. You can see how comfortable he is when we would do events with him, walking through different crowds of different people. He's genuinely energized by meeting with Muslims and Asians and Latinos. It's just part of his. He likes people. Yeah, he just genuinely likes people, and different people are of interest to him. And so you would see him walking and he would spend time with people. Yeah, and oftentimes, we would be at events where there might be, Spanish speakers who were the servers at the ballroom for the event. And he would catch their eye and they would kind of, President, hide in the shadows. And he would go and call them out and speak to them in Spanish. Just kind of aside. There's people who gave $100,000 to have this kind of a time. And there he is talking with servers and servants. And that was just who he was. And again, we can and should talk about, what the Bush presidency meant after his foreign policy and the Iraq issues. But as a man, as a human being, he's a very genuine and I think sincere person in his love and concern for people, for human beings.
Yeah. And I think that comes through. That certainly comes through. And the term compassionate conservative, I still remember that, like that was a great way of framing it. Yeah. Now, and then after W, you've got I think the Romney loss was a pretty big one for the party. And I remember there being a discussion that, wow, this party needs to reach out to a broader group, that it can't just be the party of the aggrieved, sort of white older voter.
Right.
And I was thinking, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you look at the numbers. Number one, like, there's just no way you're going to win elections. And number two, like, why would you want to be, a party of like, just one type of person?
Right.
And why not have a big tent? Like, because when I grew up, my parents immigrated in the 70s. And so we lived through the Reagan years, and we loved the speeches and the rhetoric and the kind of the vision. The city upon the hill. And so so that made a ton of sense. And then you've got Trump do basically the opposite of that, but win. Were you surprised that he was able to win with such a shrinking demographic?
Yeah. I mean, look, Trump broke one of the oldest adages in politics and campaigns. And we always say is, and we always advise our clients, that in politics, you win by addition, not by subtraction. Trump proved that truism not to be true.
Yeah.
Right? What he did was exactly what you said. Was the goal was to overperform with non-college educated whites by appealing to white identity politics, to that pernicious form of racism. It's nativism. And you do that, this populist nativism is stoked by being against Asians, Muslims, Mexicans, everybody, the disabled. I mean, the guy offended everybody, ran against everybody. And again, the way that this worked was, this never would have worked if we had a popular vote process, right? We have an electoral college process. And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying this is just the way it worked. And so what he was able to do was dramatically overperform by stoking these fears and the politics of resentment, so much so that he was losing by a wider and wider margin. Fewer and fewer Americans wanted him to be president, but in the right places, he was coalescing a very monolithic base. You have to remember, the Rust Belt is probably the least diverse region of the United States. It is overwhelmingly white. Very few Latinos, very few Asians, very few Blacks. It is overwhelmingly white. And in these overwhelmingly white areas with dying economies, you're not attracting college-educated workers for a workforce because it doesn't exist. It's hopeless desperation in a wide swath of the country. Now, normally this wouldn't be impactful in national elections, but for the fact that it's happening just in the right exact number of electoral states where he could replicate this victory again by using the same strategy, right? The goal is to be not just dog whistling, it's to be overtly, directly racist.
Yeah.
If you didn't hear me loud enough for the past 3.5 years, let me be clear on how racist I am so that you will get it and get more and more people to be activated to vote and mobilize. That's the strategy. And like I said, a politics of subtraction works in the electoral college system. It doesn't work with a popular vote. It's we don't elect a president through a majority vote. We elect him through electoral college. So again, that's where the math comes in. It's when 2 + 2 = 3 and you win. And that's what he was able to do. And it's the exact recipe he has to replicate again. I think it will be more difficult, but very possible to do it again in 2020.
So you're not, what's your take on the, I guess Nate Silver 70% probability Biden wins prediction? Do you agree with it, or do you think it's actually much closer in terms of probability?
Well, in terms of, again, probability is, I think it's probably accurate the way that he constructed his model, right? And, but we don't, as a practitioner, one of the politics is both art and science, right? And so Nate Silver has the benefit of doing the science and arguing for the science. And there's a little bit of art form in there too, right? The subjectivity of the model and what he's putting in there, making the case for why this should be in there, why it shouldn't. But in the final analysis, I mean, he's doing math and it's fine, but I don't necessarily believe all of the assumptions that he's putting into this. And again, probability being what it is, it can change with those assumptions day to day. It doesn't mean that what he's saying is what today it's 71% based off the same model. Next week, it could be 69%. So let me just say this. That's a very strange way of answering the question this way. I've been doing this for 30 years, very big campaigns in this country. every ounce of my being, my history, and my experience suggests that this race will tighten up and it's going to get closer. The math and the data and a lot of the science suggests it could actually be moving in the opposite direction. I've never been in a place like this. As the COVID virus spreads into other states, which it's beginning to, and depending on what happens into the fall with the virus, we have seen his support levels drop dramatically, even with Republicans. That's going to change the equation considerably. We also still, a wide swath of Americans still have not been impacted economically by the collapse because of the float that the U.S. government was able to do to kind of keep people above water. That's going to change over the course of the next 90 days too. And so as the economy starts to plunge deep into this recession, and as the virus continues to spread unabated because of the president's lack of commitments to following basic modern scientific knowledge, everything suggests that his support levels could go lower. But again, I'm operating under the assumption that this gets closer, that this tightens up. So I think it could be less than 70%, but we are anticipating and have built an operation to expect a very, very close race.
Where do you think this thing is going to be decided? Is this, given your George W. experience, is this another Florida mail-in ballot, let's challenge it and settle this in the Supreme Court kind of thing? Or what do you think is going to happen? That's
a great question. I believe that we could see Florida-style problems in 6 or 7 states. And I think that that's actually the goal. I think that's what Trump's objective is. It's why he's conditioning the environment and preparing his base for conflict and for this kind of conspiracy theory about the Democrats stealing the election. It's why he's saying, I won't accept the results unless I win, basically. And that there's fraud and that mail ballots, are ripe with fraud, which of course is demonstrably false. I think the goal is recognizing he's in a very sharp position to lose in a much broader sense than he was in 2016, that he's going to use the power of his office to influence the outcome of the election. And if it still doesn't go his way, to create uncertainty and undermine confidence in the democratic process. I think that's exactly what we're watching happen. It's precisely what we're watching unfold. And here's why. When you have states that have aggressive mail ballot efforts, it takes a longer time period to count those votes to ensure the integrity of the election. If you have people mailing ballots in 2 or 3 days before the election and they're postmarked November 1, that's a legitimate vote. Those are not counted, though. They're not counted immediately because a lot of them haven't arrived into the county government center where they're counted and processed by 8 p.m. on Tuesday. And even if they were, there's a separate process to handle them differently. So America has always been encultured to believe that election day happens and it ends on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November at 8 p.m. And then when the polls close, we go to a party. We wait a couple of hours, have some bad hors d'oeuvres, pop some champagne at 10:30 if your candidate wins, and November 4th who's getting ready to take office. With so many mail-in ballots, what we're going to see is a weeks-long process, perhaps the entire month of November, where we're not able to certify entirely the exact record of the election. What we are going to see, though, is daily counts coming in from the county government center. And the demography suggests that those counts are going to benefit the Democrats. It's just math. It's who is voting, right? And we know quantifiably that if I'm a younger woman of color, my chances of voting for a Republican are extraordinarily low. But if that's the group that's voting late, which is always what happens, of course you're going to see a narrowing of the vote that will benefit the Democrats. Simple mathematics, right? Simple.
Right.
The problem is that narrative, which he's already established for his base, when the race starts getting closer and closer to states, is going to be viewed as them stealing the election. And of course, they'll lie about what's happening in these different states. And so Trump may look like he's up 2 points in Pennsylvania, but by the time they process all the votes in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh and not Eastern Pennsylvania, he will lose by 4 or 5 points, and then he'll start saying they stole the election from us. Quantifiably false, but that's what he's setting November up to look like, so that he can say the election was stolen from him.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of after the first one, when even when he won, he was saying, "Oh, you know, there's millions of fake votes," and
Million.
Yeah.
He said there's over 1 million fake votes in California.
Right.
But what he's really saying is it's not white people who are stealing the election. I mean, let's be clear about that. That's what he's saying. California is his buzzword because California is becoming a white minority state. It is a white minority. It's the second largest plurality, right? What he's saying is in these states, these blue states, there's these other voters, there's this fraud happening. Because if they're not voting like you are, then it's got to be an illegal vote because these people are Marxists and they're socialists and they're trying to invade our country. And so, yeah, California, there is no fraud in California's balloting system. Just if there is, it's of such an infinitesimal amount. It's probably more of a mistake than concerted fraud. And we're talking maybe a handful of votes out of 30 million cast. Like it would be statistically impossible to not have, that fraction of a percent of fraud. So
right.
the system is safe. It's been safe for decades. This is all just an attempt to undermine confidence in the election.
What do you think the Lincoln Project is going to do after this is done? I mean, part of me is expecting that, hoping also that Biden will prevail and Trump will, voluntarily vacate the premises. But I'm also worried about how we get back together as a country and get stuff done. Because even though the crazy guy leaves, it doesn't mean we don't have problems with the economy, with the climate, with foreign policy, and just sort of this polarization. Do you see a opportunity for the Lincoln Project to continue, or is this a kind of your goal is to get this election done and then, sort of move on?
Tom, that's a great question. And it's one we're asked a lot. I would think up until a few weeks ago, our answer was really simple. And that is, I hope to be on a beach somewhere getting some, rest and relaxation and sleeping and caught up. I mean, I'm a political guy. I don't really do policy. We don't do governance well. We keep the campaign people separate. And we have one goal, and that is to get rid of Trump and Trumpism. And I think we'll be successful in that. And if we are, then we'll, hand it over to smarter people than we are in terms of running things. Having said that, I think the interest in the Lincoln Project has gotten so big nationally that we're being asked regularly questions like this. And if there is a role to help the country, then of course you do it and you serve it. I think that there is an opportunity for us to be a catalyst, not necessarily of ideas, but as a sounding board to engage more people and a more diverse set of voices. And I think that's going to be necessary. It's going to be a necessary part of healing. I think it's going to be a necessary part of bringing our institutions back to confidence and to integrity, and to restoring the norms that have worked for this country for the better part of 2.5 centuries. So, and look, your question is the right one. A lot of the work that needs to be done is a basic repairing of our founding. The wounds have been that deep. I don't think we have seen it because so much of us are just shocked and traumatized by what this guy is doing every day. It's normalcy. But there are very big, immediate, pressing issues. We are facing economic collapse now. The debt is it's unfathomably high.
Yeah.
The environmental conditions of the globe now have become more pressing. There's some very serious problems that need immediate attention, none of which work without the confidence of the people. And that's probably the most corrosive effect of the Trump era, assuming we can unseat this guy. Because you can't have a government that doesn't enjoy the confidence of its people. And that really is what I believe that he set out to do. There's none of us as professionals that believe that he actually thought he was going to win. We know the people that were running his campaign. These are not top flight people. A lot of these people would come begging me for a job in California because they couldn't hold a low level political job for years. They're now running the government or making tons of money as lobbyists. So these are not the best and the brightest. They're, in fact, they're neither the best nor the brightest people that are involved right now. And just the basic foundational work of our institutions needs to be repaired so that hopefully the next president has the competence and the confidence to do the work that needs to get done to enjoy support of the people being governed. It's that bad.
What do you think his concession speech will be like? I part of me hopes it would be magnanimous and sort of call it a day and say, look, we need to come together. But I don't think he will do that, right?
He doesn't have that capacity. That's what people have to understand. If we're not just watching a grumpy, angry old man, though he is, we're watching a man who clinically has issues, clinical narcissism. He's literally incapable of things like empathy. It's not that he chooses not to. He literally doesn't know how to do it. The few times he has shown remorse, it's always with a scripted speech that is delivered in a stilted fashion. He does not know how to even fake empathy because it's not an emotion that he is capable of having or has ever had. And I say that again, not to be pejorative. I'm not trying to insult the man. I'm just telling you, as somebody who's running a campaign against him, to watch him is to know that he is incapable of it. It's not that he's just choosing to be angry or he's pissed off. He's just not capable of empathy. And so once you understand that, you realize that there is no magnanimous defeat. It's blame. It can't be him. Like it literally cannot. And so yeah, it won't be pretty. It's going to be very difficult. In the interregnum period, assuming he loses, I mean, we'll say something very, very dangerous if he does not lose about who we are as a people and who the Democratic Party is as a party that isn't able to defeat this again. It says a lot about a lot of things. But if we are successful, I do not believe that it's going to be a graceful exit. I think it will be anything but.
And if we aren't, and he gets reelected, what is the future of the Lincoln Project?
Well, we won't stop. I mean, in many ways, we'll just be getting going, right? You don't just walk off the field and say, "Oh well, that didn't work out." Like that's not what this is about. The thing about the Lincoln Project that your viewers should know and understand is this: we don't have a client other than the country. That is what we are working for. Each one of us. This has cost us in reputation, in relationships, in revenue. Our businesses are essentially smashed. I mean, there are people that I've known for 35 years that I've not spoken to and will never speak to me again. You don't do this unless you genuinely feel you are called to something higher. I've been attacked, threatened, personally, professionally. It's not. This is not something you just do on a whim. This is something that we all knew that when we jumped off, that we were burning the ships at the shore and we could never go back. There's no. I don't know if we want to return, but if we wanted to, we could not. It's forward, and so if we aren't successful in November, we have no choice but to continue to press forward. For that same reason, is the country will need us in our fight more.
And what does that mean? Does that mean you'd focus on, holding senators and congressmen accountable, or how would you have influence in the second term if there were?
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on the outcome of the election, right? One of the criticisms we get from Republicans who are still, scared of what's going on, it's like, okay, go after Trump, but don't go after the Republicans in the Senate. It's like, look, Trumpism is not conservatism. Trumpism is the enemy of conservatism. It's nationalism. It's statism. It is the exact opposite of what conservatism is. He's able to pull together this gang of people because he's playing white racial politics. So everything he's advancing, whether it's tariffs, whether it's free trade, whether it's debt, whether it's government subsidies, none of this is consistent with conservative fiscal policy. None of it is.
Yeah.
close. The alliances that he chooses with Russia. I mean, when did Republicans fall in love with the Russians? My God, it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense when you start to realize it's really about white identity and against a changing country, a changing nation. And I say that because those that have enabled it, this could have been stopped. This all could have been stopped. We didn't have to be experiencing the pandemic, certainly not at this level. We didn't have to be experiencing economic collapse. We didn't have to be going through racial strife. Every one of these senators, Republican senators, had the opportunity to stop this when there was evidence to suggest the president was violating the United States Constitution clearly, overtly. He's on camera saying that he was going to do it, and chose not to act in the benefit of the country. To us, that's not just cowardice. That's undermining every part of our institutions that make the whole damn thing work. And I'm sorry about the long-winded answer, but listen, the only defense against that type of a cancer on our body politic is to remove it. So a lot of Republicans have attacked it, saying, don't take out the senators, don't take out Susan Collins, she's like a moderate. Well, what we say is there's no moderate cowards, there's just cowards. You didn't vote against it in a moderate fashion. You were literally derelict in the main job that you had. Time for you to go. If we're able to get rid of the Senate Republicans, then we have at least another barrier of defense against the rogue president. It's not much, but it's a hell of a lot more than we have now. And so that's one defense, and it's why we're spending so much time, effort, and energy. But remember, Trump, it's not a personality thing. Yeah, I think he's a vulgar, demeaning, troubled man with some mental issues. 100%. I don't think there's any debate about that. But what's worse is not that. It's not that he's just mentally unfit for office. It's that what he's doing is in diametrically opposed fashion to most of what I have spent my life working on in the conservative movement. So we will work against those efforts. We won't go away. No, we won't go away. We will take it out wherever it exists. There's a whole new round of Republican senators that were complicit in this that will be up for election 2 years after. There will be the midterms, and we will do everything we can to limit his power and contain the damage that he's doing to the American experiment.
Mike, tell us a little bit about how the Lincoln Project got formed. You mentioned that when Trump made his announcement speech and he came down the brass elevator, you knew that this guy was sort of a different breed. But you also mentioned that this is a little bit of career suicide, potentially career suicide for a lot of folks involved with the Lincoln Project, because you're being labeled as not being loyal to the team. How did it come about, and what was the sort of formula for deciding, okay, we're going to do this? It's a great question. And again, I apologize for jumping in so quick into this topic. I'm having a good time with you. I probably should have started with a lot of it's all good.
Yeah. So the origin story of the Lincoln Project essentially began, and again, I have been a very vocal critic of the president. I think each of the 8 of us, and there are 8 co-founders of the Lincoln Project, who all knew of each other. Many of us worked together. I knew John Weaver back in the 2000 race. He was with McCain against Bush in 2000. I've known Steve Schmidt since 1998. And so, we've known, and I've worked with the other various capacities. We've all worked with each other very loosely over the years. So if we didn't know each other, we certainly knew of each other. And it was Reed Galen called and said, hey, this was probably October of last year, and said, hey, Madrid, I got something I'm working on. We want to talk to you about it. So we chatted and said, so what do you think? We're all going to jump, and the political class has failed us. We think time is short. We think we've got the skill set and the right people to undermine this and make sure that he's not reelected. And we think we can do it in a way that's never been done before. And I said right away, I'm in. Let's go. No hesitation. And I'm convinced that all the others probably had a very similar talk as it all came together. So we launched, and the idea really was, how odd is it that the moral backbone of the Republican Party is political consultants? I mean, we're the ones saying this is not principled. This is not right.
Yeah.
This is what Republicanism is and what it stands for. And this is the ground upon which we are going to fight. And so, yeah, so, you know, it launched with the New York Times wanted a statement from us. We wrote an op-ed outlining exactly what we were going to do. You know, defeating Trump and Trumpism was part of this. There was no surprises. I think it broke out. It was rolled out to greater fanfare. I mean, there's a million anti-Trump groups out there. This one got a little bit more attention early on. We started rolling out ads that started getting some attention, but it was when the president, you know, attacked us on Twitter that it really went to a whole different level. And you realized that we were striking a chord. We were moving needles. Republicans were responding to us. A lot of people were coming out saying, "I'm with those guys." That's the Republicanism I'm aware of. The ads kept coming in extraordinary quantity and great quality, by the way. And these guys are doing a really good job, I think, of putting out not just really fast and voluminous amounts of ads, but really good content. You got to do good work to capture the nation's imagination the way that these guys have. And from there, it became just the process of building out a national political operation. I'm not going to suggest that we aren't far bigger than we thought that we would be. We are. We always knew that we would have an impact. We always knew that we could accomplish what we were doing. I don't think we realized that we would have people coming to us from every angle of popular culture, and Hollywood producers wanting to do work with us, and, you know, voter rights organizations and Democratic groups and Republican groups. And it's all been it's been kind of a whirlwind, but we are singularly focused on the same mission that we talked about in that original op-ed, which is winning this race. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Of course. So
in that same op-ed, the New York Times wrote an article the next day, and it quoted Steve Bannon saying the danger is if the Lincoln Project gets just 3 to 4%, not 34, 3 to 4% of the Republican vote, it's going to have a tremendous impact on the outcome of the election. Mathematically, he's exactly right. When we sat down for our first talk on the phone, you know, the questions were, we trying to get 50% of the votes here? We're trying to reform the party? What are we trying to do? And the answer was no, we're trying to win the race. Madrid, what's it take to win the race? I'm like, man, you get 3%, 5%, 4%. It changes the entire national equation of just the Republican vote. Remember, Donald Trump only won with 77,000 votes across a handful of states. So 1% of Republican movement in that, he would have lost 3 or 4 states. 2, he would have lost 4 to 5. 4%, I mean, it's game over. So that's always been the goal, is to just talk to that sliver of Republicans and make sure that whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be in the best possible position. And so that's what our singular focus is on. And so people see a lot of our ads and they're like, is that really moving Republican votes? Well, if you're asking that question, the answer is probably no, and it's not designed to. But there's a whole bevy of ads that people have seen. Dan Barkoff ads with our veterans, for example. The Morning in America ad, the Reagan ad that was so powerful that it, you know, got under Trump's skin, which speaks directly to the economy. A lot of the COVID messaging, the Memories ad, which is about seniors not being able to see their grandchildren. These are absolutely directed towards the Republican base, and it's all metrics and data driven on how we approach that on social media to deliver those messages to the right constituencies. And so at this point in the race, you can, you know, however you look at it, Donald Trump is not doing nearly as well with the Republican base as he needs to in order to be successful in re-election. It's not even close. Is there time for him to reconcile that and bring it back? Yes, there is. There's a lot of time to do that. Are they singularly focused on that as a campaign? Yes, they are. You can start to see where they're spending, where they're getting traction, what states they're focusing on. And it's why the Lincoln Project is focusing on keeping our offensive strategy on the Republican base to keep them fighting for the base that they need to just be competitive.
Mike, tell us a little bit about the suite of kind of activities the Lincoln Project is working on. I think we all know the ads and we kind of think, well, those are the ads guys, but it sounds like there's other kind of elements to the effort.
Yeah, that's a great question. And look, this is kind of what makes us laugh is we're political consultants. You know, a couple of us are really good ad makers, but the rest of us we're political operators. We run campaigns. So a lot of the criticism, and it's coming from the right and the left, which tells you you're doing something exactly right. People trying to figure out what the hell are they doing? Like there's all these internet ads, and yeah, they're amazing, but are they working? No, we're building an entire political operation. That's our job. That's what we do. That's what we do. And so we have statewide leadership teams. We have very aggressive online and digital infrastructure in 13 states, critical states, including states like Texas and Georgia and Arizona, which if you had asked me 60 days ago if we would be in those states, I would say maybe maybe Arizona. I believe, incidentally, Arizona is a far more critical state than people realize. I think Arizona is the new Ohio for Republicans. We can talk about that if you want to get really into the weeds. But so no, there's volunteer activity. We're not doing door-to-door activity, incidentally, because of the pandemic, and I don't expect that we will. But we're doing very aggressive postcarding programs, Republican to Republican outreach. We're doing a ton of volunteer recruitment. There's a lot of media activity happening at the local level and at the state level. Most people are familiar with us because of the internet and this kind of internet sensation that has developed. That is just the one 30,000 foot level activity that we are engaged in. Of course, I think it's been wildly successful, but it's kind of like an iceberg, as Rick Wilson calls it. What you're seeing is just kind of the very top of that ice, and down below is a huge amount of activity, most of which is focused on the targeting and the advertising campaign that's about to begin in the next 48, 72 hours.
Could you talk a little bit about the sources of funding for the, I guess you'd call it a campaign, for the campaign? Like, where's the money coming from?
I think 85% of it is coming from small donors, meaning less than $100. $77, I think, is our average contribution. And that's the vast majority of our funding and our money. Now, once we started to really kind of catch fire, we have gotten large donors, of course, and they range from large Democratic donors to large Republican donors. But the vast bulk of our funding, I think it's 87% of our money comes from small donors under $77 internet contributions.
And do you guys publicize like how much you've raised, or do you talk about that at all?
I can't talk specifics, but it is all publicly available, including the donors. It's not my side of the shop. What I will say is I think we've probably more than tripled our early estimates of our most ambitious goals of what we wanted to do to get our job done. And that's just because it's kind of caught fire, kind of caught a genie in a bottle. So one of the challenges professionally with that, it sounds like it's a great thing to have. When you have a very limited time frame, it's not like we're building a startup company. It's like, right, this all ends at 8 p.m. on November 3rd. Is how do you build something to have the most effectiveness, not knowing what your revenue streams are going to look like in order to be successful? And let me spend a little bit more time on that. One of the biggest professional challenges I've faced, and it's rather unique, is an expanding battlefield. When we began, my expectation was we were going to be fighting on 4 to 6 states, right? Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. Then, after that, we do look at Florida, maybe a little North Carolina, right? Start looking at the battleground states. You never anticipate that you're going to be looking at Alaska, Georgia, Arizona, Texas. But that's what the math is saying. You got to follow the data. The data is what the data is. And so building an operation that is now a 13-state strategy in a very narrow window while also effectively implementing the political plan you had for the original 4 to 6 states has been the biggest professional challenge of my life. I think it's a very unique place to be, considering we're much smaller than the presidential campaigns, both in terms of infrastructure and resources. It's 8 of us and another 25 people. I think 21 people. We're like 30 people. I think the Trump campaign is 1,200 people, right? They've got more. The Trump campaign has more people in most swing counties, paid staffers, than our entire national team. So, we can look at that as a weakness. We view it as an incredible strength. We're very, very fast. We're incredibly nimble, and we don't have the red tape to go through, right? Rick Wilson wants to make an ad. A lot of times he's just cutting the ad overnight. It goes up the next day. People are amazed at how fast we are to respond. I am myself. We've got 7 production teams. that are constantly churning this content out in his direction. And it's just changed the way the modern campaign is going to be run. We are able for the first time, Tom, to be able to contain the megaphone that Donald Trump has. If you look at, and that was by design, incidentally, you look at the social media following and the reach that we have and the way that we roll these things out and the way we utilize our social media platforms, we are literally containing his megaphone. Before us, he could say something and the entire world was watching. Now we've got a front that actually contains what he's saying, and we're able to respond so quickly and for such a long period of time, we're shutting down the efficacy of his ad and his message bleeding out. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
The reason why that people I don't think realize how important that is without the Lincoln Project, what you had was him basically railing on a politician and then the media covering it for the entire day. So he would suck up all of the oxygen and no one person could ever take him out. I mean, anybody who's tried to take on Donald Trump has been rolled by him because they have shame. He has no shame, right? Politicians are naturally not constituted to go to the gutter. Well, we're political consultants. I mean, we built the damn gutter. We're more than happy to go down there with them. And he's got two options. He can either attack us, which he did, and when he does, he makes us stronger, or he can ignore us and just take the hits and we humiliate him. Those are his only two choices. And that's what the Lincoln Project has been doing. And we are the only people that can do it because, one, we're Republican, and two, we're willing to do it against a member of our own party. And three, we're damn good at it. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I think we've proven ourselves. We're just damn good at it. So we've been able to contain his messaging in a way that has never happened before since the day he came down the escalator. And that's a really important piece of what the Lincoln Project has done. And now we've been so successful at it, like everything, the critics start coming out and going, well, is that all they're doing? Is that all they're doing? The answer is no. We're just doing that one small piece of what we do very, very well. And that is what has made, it's what's put Biden in a position to win this thing. Imagine for a moment what this summer would have been like if there had been no Lincoln Project. You know, Joe Biden would have been no money right after the primary. He didn't have money during the primary. He would have been broke. He would have been in the basement just taking incoming fire. And the dynamics of this race would be completely different. What we've done is we've played offense and we've basically dominated the media every day, or most of them, 90% of the days from the middle of March until this moment. And now the dynamics will change. Kamala's, VP. You are seeing for the first time the emergence of the Biden campaign on the national stage. They are going to be a bigger force than we are, as they should be. Their battleship is coming in after this, this pirate ship has been out taking shots and, waging guerrilla warfare. Now it's going to look more like a campaign. We bought all that time for them to recoup, recalibrate, not allow them to define Biden, and we kept the offensive messaging on Donald Trump, which is invaluable. But I mean, we're not done. Don't get me wrong. We're political professionals. We have a very strong sense of what comes next, and I think you're going to see some really powerful stuff from us with a very different tactical focus.
Mike, my last question is for people who are watching this and saying, yeah, I really like the work that the Lincoln Project is doing, and I like the kind of clarity of the mission and impressed by the execution. How can they be helpful? How can they get involved?
There's really two really important ways. One, and again, I'm going to say it and I'll get it out of the way. Any contributions do help. It helps us amplify the message, okay? Whether it's a $2 contribution or a $1,000 contribution, it does all help. It helps us move the message and dominate the narrative. But the second, and it's equally as important, in fact, most professional political consultants before the Lincoln Project and before 2020 would never say this, but your collectivism matters, right? It used to be derided. People think that they're just sharing stuff on the internet and reposting stuff on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, Instagram, whatever social media platform you use. That matters. It matters. The Lincoln Project would not work if we hadn't had people, activists, committed to sharing and working and driving our message. We're 8 people, but the army that we have built up is what is so powerful. And that's, frankly, I think Yang would say the same thing. That's what drove the energy. is not just the contributions. That helps because you need to pepper it and build it out a little bit, but it's the commitment and passion of those followers who believe in the same mission and the same goal. And we literally wake up and have a phone call every morning. First question is, how are the troops feeling today? What are you hearing? Because if you follow any of us on social media, you know we are very engaged with our people. We have conversations. Sometimes late at night, I'll take an hour worth of break from work, and I just get on Twitter and just start answering questions that people have about the campaign, completely transparent. And I'm not the only one that does that. And anybody can ask us any questions, and we answer as many as we can. And that's like, okay, I got to get back to the campaign. It was great talking to you all. And so we have a very close relationship with our followers. And in fact, a lot of ad ideas have come from people on Twitter saying, hey, have you guys thought about doing this? This would be a great ad. And we throw it into the hopper and someone go, that is a great idea. Let's do that. So that's not uncommon. My point is this. It matters, especially in the time of pandemic, okay? The ability to walk precincts and do kind of traditional voter engagement, I honestly believe those days are probably gone. The Lincoln Project is the first time you will really ever hear a professional political consultants at the very highest levels say, okay, this social activism stuff really does matter. It's now central. It's not a feature. It's central to what is going to have to happen in national campaigns. So as much as I want your contributions, and I will ask for them at lincolnproject.us, I'm really much more interested in your sharing our tweets, engaging us in the debate, and letting people in your own networks know, especially the Yang gang. I mean, you guys are phenomenal what you guys are able to do. You get that kind of a force on board with the Lincoln Project, that's a hell of a good marriage. And it's going to be effective in what we're trying to accomplish. So that's my goal, that's my hope, that's my expectation. And that's what you guys can do in the last 80 days of this campaign.
All right. Well, you heard it from Mike. If you're interested in supporting the Lincoln Project, first of all, go ahead and check out their site, lincolnproject.us. Consider a financial donation. Do you feel like, are we reaching a point where if you got more money, like you wouldn't know what to do with it? Or do you think you could really put it to use?
No, well, here's why. That's a really good question. The answer is because of our flexibility, we are able to expand into areas that we wouldn't otherwise. So, for example, we're going to go after Lindsey Graham, which we never in a million years would have thought was possible. We're going after Lindsey. You heard it here first. Nerds for Humanity. We're coming after you. Lincoln Project's going to show up in South Carolina. We're coming. So, yeah, that what it does is it allows us to go after other members. We're in Alaska, like I said. So if we have the resources, it's not like we're just doubling down or tripling down in Pennsylvania. No, we are going to continually bring the fights to them. And that is a luxury that the Biden campaign does not have, right? One of the big criticisms of Hillary Clinton's campaign is it was expanding when it should have been fortifying its main state. She shouldn't have been in Arizona. She should have been in Wisconsin. And that's absolutely right. We don't have that downside. If we want to go attack somebody in South Carolina, no one's going to criticize us for not bringing the race home. It's Joe Biden's race at this point. Ours is to continually do everything we can to defeat Trumpism wherever it's at. So sorry about that long answer. I'm going to try to wrap up here.
No, it's great. I love the fact that you're considering holding Lindsey Graham accountable. As someone who really admired John McCain, and I remember, the Straight Talk Express and, the early 2000s, John McCain, and it was so awesome. And to see someone who said he was a close friend just embrace another person who's been so disrespectful to an American hero. It's just, I feel like that's justice. So I hope you guys, I might have to make a contribution just for that reason alone.
Yeah. And that, I agree with you more. It's painful. Like I said, it's just not right. And
gross.
It's gross. When you see that, it explains everything that's wrong with what's going on in the Republican Party at this moment in time. I mean, when you're able to turn on your friend after he's been buried, this is unconscionable, and we won't stand for it. So as long as we have the resources, we will keep bringing the fights. And if we're winning in an area, we're not going to double or triple down. We're going to go find other areas to bring the fights to.
I love it, Mike. Well, I know I promised you we'd keep it to half an hour. We went double that time, but it was a super interesting conversation. Folks, if you're watching this, please like and share this interview so more people can learn about the Lincoln Project and hear from Mike's unique perspective. And Mike, hopefully we'll get you back on the show again soon to kind of talk about how the race is going, or maybe an after action report over a victory toast.
I would love to do that, Tom. Thank you for having me. It means a lot, and love the show and love what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Right on. Well, with that, we're just going to wrap it up by saying goodbye, nerds.
Bye, nerds.
I love it.
Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. Let's get this bread. Freedom dividend. Are all y'all paying attention? Automation gonna sweep the nation unless we get him in. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. First we get this money, then on 420. He gonna give some high fives to some high guys. Decriminalize marijuana so we can smoke if we wanna. Down with the opioid trend, up with the mental health thing. Yeah, math. Yo, it's just math. Yo, it's simple math. Yo, can you do math? Yo. Eliminate super PACs. Color stars making stacks. Student loan forgiveness plan. Cops wearing cameras and climate change is real again. Science rules. Teachers bringing home some bread. Medicare for every citizen. That's nice. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah.